Welcome to As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. Today we welcome Death Rattle guitarist Ryan Vanderwolk to the podcast. The new Death Rattle record, The Moral Chokehold, is out now on streaming platforms, with vinyl, CD, and Bandcamp versions being released on July 11th with M Theory Audio. Ryan talks about the impact of Ride the Lightning, the break the band took before reconvening for The Moral Chokehold, touring in Europe as a smaller band, and more. Thanks so much for checking out this episode of As the Story Grows. If you're brand new to the podcast, welcome. You can find links in the show notes or at asthestorygrows.com for our Discord server, our mailing list, and our Patreon page, where you can support the show financially and get early access to every episode. Enjoy today's conversation with Ryan from Death Rattle.
So Chris and I are located in southern New Hampshire. I live in Nashua. He lives in Merrimack. And then Trey is located in Sturbridge, Massachusetts. And Justin is located in Springfield, Massachusetts.
Okay, nice. Is that where you grew up?
I grew up down in the Cape. I lived in the Cape about 10 years ago. And then, of course, I moved up to New Hampshire to be closer to Death Rattle.
Okay.
So,
nice.
Yep.
Nice. What was growing up on Cape Cod like?
Isolated.
Yeah.
Peaceful and safe in a lot of ways, but also kind of isolated. Definitely, I would say it's a nice place. It's a nice place, but it's to get out to the real world. I think you kind of get a distorted view of what the real world is like. And then you get out to the rest of the world and you're like, whoa, there's a lot out there, you know? So I think that's a big thing with that. And, getting to everything all the time, even, just when we're just playing local shows around Worcester, Boston, Providence, New Hampshire, Connecticut, in that general New England area, it's just such a long haul to get everywhere because you're stuck out on a peninsula,
Yeah.
So for sure.
Nice. What got you into music?
Well, I mean, I think probably the biggest impact was a combination of my father and my older brother. My older brother was listening to all kinds of cool stuff, and it kind of ranged and varied from Sublime to Rage Against the Machine to a million different things, kind of bouncing around in the 90s. And then he turned me on to some bands, and I kind of tended to like the more aggressive ones. Okay. And then he introduced me to Metallica and all that, and Rage Against the Machine and some other bands that really grabbed me when I was young. And then I would say, my father was also exposing me to Black Sabbath and Van Halen. And so a lot of that stuff really got me into it,
Nice. Was there like a particular band or something that made you gravitate towards guitar? Or was it just general the allure of guitar?
Oh no, it was absolutely Ride the Lightning by Metallica. Nice. I had been listening for a couple of years to a bunch of different great bands. I've been listening to whatever, all kinds of bands, but I basically heard Ride the Lightning by Metallica, and I literally remember that day being so blown away. That was the first time I was like, man, I want to play heavy metal guitar so badly. I just something clicked that day, and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever,
Was the inspiration for the band name the Pantera song?
It is. Basically, it is. Yeah. What happened there was I was just, we had been throwing around band names and nothing stuck. Mm-hmm. And then, it's so hard to name a band early on because you want to really get it right. And basically, I just was talking to Jimmy, the other guitar player that was in the band for the first 2 records that we did. And we were talking about band names, and I had a Pantera Reinventing the Steel guitar tab book flipped over on my bed at the time, because at the time we were early in the band, we were learning lots of covers and trying to write our first songs, And basically what happened was I just looked down and I glanced at Death Rattle. I said, "How about Death Rattle? That sounds really cool." And he's like, "Oh, that sounds really awesome." I presented it to the guys later that week when we got together. I thought it was a cool idea. And then everyone loved it, and then no one refuted it, so it just kind of came to be. Like, we never agreed on it either. Nobody ever actually agreed on the name. It just kind of happened. Like, one day, Donnie was like, "So, are we Death Rattle?" And I guess we're like, "Maybe." And then he drew up a logo for the band, because he's an artist and a tattoo artist. So he drew up a logo, and that was it. We just went forward with that. Yep.
Volition came out in 2017, so it's been a minute since you guys have put out a record. What was the reason for that time off? Just like pandemic, or just like...
Yeah, basically in 2017 we put out that record, and obviously we're going to try to ride it for a couple of years and then do another record. But what happened was we did a big tour to celebrate the kickoff, a U.S. tour with some bands, and the tour fell apart because the headliner's bus broke down and ended up being kind of a nightmare. We ended up going off and doing a couple Japan tours, 2019 and 2020. We're trying to gain traction for the record. We felt the record just didn't get enough traction, and then we started dabbling in some song ideas, kind of getting going in 2019 and 2020. Throwing some song ideas around, but nothing really crazy. Just a couple of bases for a couple of songs. Then we went on tour in Japan in 2020, and the whole world shut down. We had a big argument within the band. One of the members left the band, as a result of all this. We didn't speak for 18 months as a band after that tour. We went to Japan right at the beginning of COVID, so early on that while we were in the middle city of the tour in Nagoya, Japan, in between Osaka and Tokyo, the first United States case of COVID was confirmed.
Oh, geez.
So to put it in perspective, it was a very tense time.
Yeah.
And then we took 18 months of just not speaking. We literally didn't speak for 18 months. We just went our separate ways. I knew I was going to resurrect it at some point, but I wanted to give it time and breathe and really find myself in this situation, because for over 10 years I had dedicated my life to this band to such a degree, and it was very frustrating for these issues to come up. But the pandemic was wholly unique. It was a crazy situation. We worked through it. Trey and I had some issues we had to work through, but we talked like adults. We worked it out, and now we have a great relationship, and things couldn't be any better than they are. And so we got together, we did a record, we worked with a session bass player, and then it just took a while. The record's been done for over 2 years.
Oh, geez.
So it's not like it was meant to be this long, but the process of writing, we took our time. Recording was actually pretty quick. We did it in a couple of months with Kevin Billingsley up at Halo Studios in Windham, Maine. He was amazing. But then, the mix and master and the artwork and the layouts, the videography, the photography, everything took so long. Then management with label shopping, and then, signing, and then the whole process of that. I mean, we signed with the label a year before the record was set to come out. I mean, so it's just, there's so many things in the process that were beyond our control that just took so damn long.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned label shopping. This album's coming out with M Theory Audio. How did you guys get connected with them, and what made them the right label?
Our management hooked us up with them, and I looked at Marco had a lot of respect for what we were bringing to the table, which meant a lot to me, because Marco is obviously a major industry veteran and he really knows what he's doing. So obviously it's an honor to work with a guy like him. So we're grateful for that. But that's pretty much how it came to be. Our management was label shopping, and we looked at all the offers that we had when the time came, and we decided to go with Marco.
Nice. There seems to be something happened. The album was originally supposed to come out last Friday. There was an announcement it was being released the 11th. On M Theory and your Bandcamp page, it's the 11th. But the album did hit other streaming services last week. Was that just somebody forgot to change the release date?
I honestly can't even speak to that because we're not handling any of this stuff. I'm not exactly sure what happened. I believe the record label communicated to them that they were supposed to postpone the digital release on Spotify, and then and some others, I think. And somehow the digital version ended up coming out. So it is what it is. We're just rolling with it.
Yeah.
The vinyls are ready and they're shipping and they're, for the July 11th date, and then the CD digipacks, I guess, still are not done.
No, man.
Yeah. We have a couple of shows coming up. We're going to do our record release shows. We're hoping to have the CDs available also for that show, but I don't know if that's going to happen. We do have the vinyls for that show, so that's good.
Album's called The Moral Chokehold. Where did the title and kind of concept come from?
So that's all Trey. Trey has actually named the last two records. Trey named Volition because he came up with it and we liked it more than anything that had been presented, which is typically how it works, right? And then we all came up with a bunch of names, and he actually came up with the idea. We went up to the whiteboard in our jam space, we wrote down a bunch of names. And what we kept doing was we kept removing one name. So like, all right, what's the weakest one left? And then we'd vote on it and you 86 it, you know? Nice. And then what's the next weakest? You vote on it, you 86 it. And then we got down to 4 left. And then we looked at it, we were struggling because the remaining 4 were all really good. Mm-hmm. And we were like, damn, you know, like these are all really good. But we all collectively lean towards the Moral Chokehold. Okay. It's a name that Trey came up with, and we just loved it. And it kind of explains a lot of things, like the Moral Chokehold, where a lot of times people are pressuring you on a moral basis to be a certain way, even if what they're pushing is the wrong thing. And they're basically saying that you are immoral if you're not willing to say the truth about something. If the zeitgeist of what is morality says so one way or another. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's the Moral Chokehold. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys have Bjorn from Soilwork doing a guest on this record. How'd you get connected with him?
So again, I got to shout out to Trey. Trey was so instrumental on this record for putting his fingerprints on everything and is so helpful. But he has a little bit of a relationship with him, and he had actually worked with him on a song previously with another band he was in, the Western Massacre, friends of ours, and it came out killer. And so he wanted to do it again. He did it with us, and obviously we feel really great about the song. And so, yeah, that came about, by Trey. And, Speed Street is like basically Trey's favorite vocalist of all time. So that's a really special honor. So it's obviously something we felt that we should do, It's a little bit out of the ordinary for what's typical for Death Rattle sound, but we absolutely love the song, and, we'll see how it's received, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Album's out July 11th or streaming now. What's outside of the show for the album release, what's your plan or hope for this year?
Well, we just confirmed a big tour in Europe. It's almost 30 shows in a whole bunch of countries with Atheist and Origin. And then also a death metal band, Gorgatron, from somewhere, I think Idaho or something. I forget where they're from. I gotta look them up. We just learned about them the other day. And then some support. Yeah, and then we got some supports from some bands from the UK and Estonia, Infested Angels and Intrepid, respectively. Yeah. Nice.
Is it easier to kind of go to Europe and make a debt touring over there than it is as kind of I hate to say lower tier, but, as kind of maybe a lower mid-tier metal band in the States?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the situation. Realistically, when it comes to touring, it comes down to a lot of factors. But one is, can you do it? Can you swing it? Can you make it happen?
Yeah.
But the other is, what are the best opportunities? So if you have 4 or 5 opportunities and one of them seems to be much better than the rest, you just try to go for that. So
Yeah.
we actually were hunting for one more U.S. tour this year. We did a U.S. tour in January. We were hunting for one more for later in the year, and not a lot of great opportunities that we liked were presenting themselves. So we basically decided to go for Europe.
Nice.
So, which is interesting because we're going to Europe for the second time this year.